I was never a son of Horus. I was and remain a Luna wolf, a proud son of Chthoniya, a loyal servant of the Emperor, beloved by all. I am your enemy, Horus.
In military structures, loyalty is often held as one of the most revered virtues. It is considered the bedrock upon which discipline and order are built. Soldiers are expected to exhibit unwavering loyalty to their commanders, who in turn are charged with leading their forces through the crucible of war. However, the complex nature of military engagement sometimes leads individuals to confront the question, when is disobedience justified? Loyalty in the military context refers to a soldier's allegiance to their leaders, their fellow soldiers, and the greater mission at hand. It is often nurtured through rigorous training, shared experiences, and a strong sense of purpose. In the 41st millennium, loyalty is not merely an expectation. It is almost a sacramental bond that ties Space Marines to their chapters and the Imperium. The Space Marine legions, like the Lunar Wolves, embody loyalty to their primarchs and the Emperor. This loyalty is cultivated through a culture of honor, sacrifice, and brotherhood, with the ultimate goal of serving the Imperium against the numerous threats that besiege it. While loyalty is vital, the necessity for disobedience can emerge in situations where orders conflict with an individual's moral compass or the greater good of the mission. The complexity of warfare often leads to scenarios where blind adherence to orders may result in catastrophic consequences. Throughout the history of humanity, there were numerous examples of officers who openly challenged the orders of their superiors regarding, for instance, the use of excessive force against civilians. Officers' disobedience often stems from a moral conviction to protect innocent lives, illustrating how personal ethics can often supersede the expected loyalty to one's commanders. One compelling example of justified disobedience is Garviel Loken from the Lunar Wolves. Loken was a loyal servant of the Emperor and a highly regarded captain. His journey through the events of the Horus heresy put him at the crossroads of loyalty and morality. As the Lunar Wolves, under the command of Horus, were drawn into the embrace of chaos, Loken found himself increasingly at odds with the actions and directives of his commander. Loyalty in military command is a double-edged sword. It fosters unity and effectiveness, but can also lead to complicity in morally reprehensible actions. The example of Garviel Loken illustrates the painful yet necessary tension between loyalty to a commander and loyalty to one's principles. While loyalty to one's leaders is crucial, there are instances when disobedience may not only be justified but required for the greater good. The complexities of warfare demand a nuanced understanding of loyalty, one that values ethical considerations and the well-being of humanity over blind obedience. As history of the Imperium demonstrates time and time again, loyalty and disobedience are not merely opposing forces, they are interwoven in the fabric of military conduct, compelling soldiers to navigate the murky waters of command with moral integrity. The essence of true loyalty may sometimes lie in the courage to stand against one's commanders, ensuring that the ideals for which one fights remain intact. Garviel Loken initially held the rank of captain within the Lunar Wolves Legion's 10th Company, later known as the Sons of Horus, during the final phase of the Great Crusade and leading up to the Istvan III atrocity, an event that marked the onset of the Horus heresy. Loken earned immense respect as both a warrior and a leader from his fellow Space Marines and his Primarch. His calm demeanor, strategic intellect, and impressive combat record distinguished him, culminating in his selection for the Mournival, the esteemed group of advisors to Primarch Horus. However, following Horus's descent into chaos on Davin, Loken was deemed too committed to the principles of the Great Crusade and the Emperor to be involved in the sinister machinations consuming his once noble legion. Tasked with leading the initial assault on Istvan III with the Sons of Horus, Loken quickly emerged as a prominent figure among the Loyalist faction, which included those from the Lunar Wolves, Emperor's Children, World Eaters, and Death Guard, who steadfastly refused to forsake the Emperor of mankind and yield to the ruinous powers. On the battlefield of Istvan III, Loken and his loyalist battle brothers renounced their identities as sons of Horus, reaffirming their allegiance as lunar wolves once again, exacting a significant toll in lives from those they had previously called brothers. Ultimately, however, the loyalists were overpowered and systematically annihilated. Loken found himself in a life-and-death struggle against his former comrade, First Captain Abaddon, sustaining severe injuries in the process. At that time, it was widely believed that he perished during the final orbital bombardment that targeted the Loyalists' stronghold. Subsequently, Loken was found as a half-mad berserker Astartes, who referred to himself as Cerberus. After enduring the harrowing events on Istvan III, he was extracted from the haunted remnants of Coral City by Captain Nathaniel Garrow, a fellow Loyalist and former member of the Death Guard Legion, alongside the Argentia Primus of Malcador's Knights Errant. Loken was recruited to join the ranks of the Knights Errant. Following several years on Terra, marked by clandestine operations, including a failed attempt to eliminate Horus, Loken was selected by Malcador to be one of the 9 Astartes entrusted with the pivotal task of establishing the prestigious Grey Knight Space Marine chapter. This chapter would eventually evolve into the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition. Although Loken was initially designated as the Grey Knight's Grand Master, to be named Krios, he declined this esteemed position, opting instead to confront the Sons of Horus during the Siege of Terra. Captain Loken's bravery and resilience established him as a promising officer within the Lunar Wolves from the outset. His close friend, Captain Tarik Torgadon, served as a mentor, guiding Loken in various facets of his martial career and ultimately facilitating his entry into the Mournival, a circle of informal advisors from the Lunar Wolves Legion who accompanied Horus as his most trusted allies. Loken's induction into the Mournival followed the Lunar Wolves' successful campaign on the world of 6319, which brought the planet into Imperial compliance. Notably, Loken was the sole member of the Mournival who did not bear a direct resemblance to the Warmaster Horus. Within the Mournival, Loken was designated as the Warmaster's Naismith, tasked with presenting counter-arguments to any plans of Horus that he found objectionable. He was intended to be an advisor, characterized by a composed and unflappable demeanor. During this period, Loken occupied a privileged position within the Warmaster's inner circle. While the Lunar Wolves were executing Imperial compliance missions on 6319 towards the conclusion of the Great Crusade, an eerie voice emerged through the Vox communication devices used by the Lunar Wolves. This voice belonged to a demonic entity of chaos. In that region of 6319, the boundaries between the material realm and the immaterium were notably fragile, especially among the remaining holdouts resisting Imperial conquest. Despite the Great Crusade, Imperial forces had been intentionally kept in ignorance of chaos and the grave demonic threats posed by the immaterium, a secrecy maintained by the Emperor and his Primarchs. The voice merely identified itself as Samus and cautioned against the impending invasion by the Lunar Wolves. Pursuing the source of this communication, the Lunar Wolves ventured into a mountainous area of the planet. There, Sergeant Xavier Jubal of Loken's 10th Company fell victim to possession by the Chaos Demon Samus, transforming into a grotesque abomination described by witnesses as a bloated monstrosity, trailing armor plates like tattered metal rags and oozing pus and blood, which then attacked his fellow Astartes. After a brutal confrontation, Captain Loken succeeded in subduing and ultimately slaying the deranged, mutated Jubal. This encounter began to awaken in Loken a profound unease, leading him to question whether the imperial truth was flawed and whether everything he had been taught regarding religion and the supernatural was merely superstition that humanity had rightly abandoned. Following the catastrophic events on 6319, the Lunar Wolves were dispatched to bolster the Emperor's children on a planet that would later earn the grim title Murder from the Imperium, owing to the brutal nature of the arachnoid Xenos inhabiting it. The Emperor's children had arrived on Murder to investigate the mysterious vanishing of a company of Astartes from the Blood Angels Legion. It was here that Loken, along with his Mournival brother Tarik Torgadon, formed a friendship with Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's children. During this period, after the conflict on Murder concluded, and shortly after the severance of imperial relations with the Interrex, an outcome orchestrated by the treachery of Erebus and the Word-Bearers, the Lunar Wolves were officially rebranded as the Sons of Horus. This change, initially proposed by the Emperor during the triumph of Uluna, aimed to assert the War Master's dominance over the other Primarchs. Although Horus was initially hesitant to elevate himself in such a manner, he ultimately accepted the new designation after consulting his closest ally among the Primarchs, Sanguinius. The dynamic between Loken and his Mournival brother, First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon, was perpetually fraught, as Loken's composed, introspective demeanour frequently clashed with Abaddon's fiery temperament and brusque disposition. Nevertheless, both warriors stood by Horus during his assault against the rebellious imperial forces on the moon of Davin. When the War Master was mortally injured in combat by the Nurglite former planetary governor of Davin, Yugen Temba, who wielded a chaos-infused relic blade known as the Kinnebrach Anathema, to poison Horus with a Nurgle-spawned toxin that even his superhuman immunity could not counter. It was Loken who vehemently opposed the proposal to transport Horus to a chaos temple called the Temple of the Serpent Lodge on Davin for healing by shamans who were essentially chaos sorcerers. In their desperation to save Horus Lupercal's life at any cost, Abaddon and Horus Aximan supported the idea, while Tarik Torgadon allied with Loken, convinced that such a breach of the imperial truth would ultimately bring about greater calamity than the loss of their Primarch. The resulting discord within the Mournival nearly escalated to violence. However, Loken ultimately acquiesced to the prevailing sentiments of the broader Legion, opting to bide his time and witness the outcome. This mindset cost Loken not only the confidence of his two Mournival brothers, but also that of Horus himself, who emerged from his healing at the hands of the chaos cultists of the Serpent Lodge as a transformed individual. He was a man consumed by jealousy, egotism, resentment towards his father, the Emperor, and an insatiable thirst for absolute power. Having bargained his soul to the Chaos Gods for the gifts of the Warp, Horus was now firmly ensnared in their grasp. In this new dark phase, Horus selected the world of Istvan III as the stage to eliminate those among the four openly declared traitor legions: the Sons of Horus, the Emperor's children, the World Eaters, and the Death Guard, whom he deemed untrustworthy to follow him or serve the Chaos Gods in his bid to overthrow the Emperor and seize control of the galaxy. Loken and Torgadon, along with approximately a third of the Astartes from these four legions who were deemed loyalists, were dispatched to the capital of Istvan III under the guise of quelling a rebellion instigated by the Slaneshi-corrupted planetary governor, Vardus Pral. In reality, they were betrayed and slaughtered by life-eater virus bombs launched from the War Master's orbiting fleet. A last-minute warning from their comrade, Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's children, alerted some of the loyalists, including Loken and Torgadon, allowing them enough time to seek refuge and thereby survive the ensuing virus plague and the catastrophic firestorm that claimed the lives of all 8 billion inhabitants of Istvan III. Despite Tarvitz's warning, at least a third of the loyalist Astartes failed to reach safety before the bombs fell or emerged from their shelters prematurely, believing the attack had ceased. They were obliterated in the subsequent firestorm that ignited the toxic, decaying gases released by the bodies of the virus victims. With Horus's treachery now laid bare, Loken, Torgadon, and the remaining loyalists reclaimed the name Lunar Wolves to signify their break from the Sons of Horus, as they openly battled against the War Master's traitor legions. Employing a defensive strategy aimed at inflicting attrition on the traitor legions over several solar months, they hoped to buy time for news of Horus's betrayal to reach the Emperor. They managed to endure on Istvan III for nearly 2 months before the climactic battle, during which Horus Aximan and Abaddon descended to confront Loken and Tarik directly. Loken fought valiantly against Abaddon, but sustained critical injuries, leaving him helpless amid the final orbital bombardment by Horus's fleet, which extinguished the Loyalist resistance. By some twist of fate, or perhaps by the will of the Emperor, Loken survived the bombardment. Months later, long after Horus's fleet had advanced to face the Emperor's Loyalists, at the drop site massacre on Istvan V, where 4 more Astartes legions openly declared their allegiance to Chaos, Loken finally managed to extricate himself from the ruins of Coral City. Regrettably, the trauma from the betrayal and his injuries had shattered his mind, causing him to lose both his memory and his sense of identity. In the wake of this upheaval, he adopted a new persona, naming himself Cerberus, after the ancient Terran mythological hound that guarded the gates of the underworld. He chose this identity under the belief that death had forsaken him. For over a Terran year, he became the monster haunting the charred and shattered remnants of Istvan III, eliminating other supposed survivors of the betrayal, convinced that he was the last Loyalist space marine remaining in existence. This dynamic shifted when Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow, a former member of the Death Guard Legion, who had since become Malcador's Agentia Primus after escaping Istvan III aboard the Imperial frigate Eisenstein, returned to the Forsaken Planet. Garrow had been dispatched specifically to locate Loken as a potential recruit for the Knights Errant, a covert assembly of Loyalist space marines that Malcador intended to establish under the Emperor's directives, which would eventually form a cornerstone of the Imperial Inquisition. Upon arrival, Garrow encountered a handful of survivors who spoke of a creature stalking them. Taking initiative, Garrow sought out the lair of this so-called beast of Istvan III. There, he stumbled upon the long-deceased body of Tariq Torgadon, only to be ambushed by the dishevelled, almost deranged figure known as Cerberus. After an intense struggle, during which Cerberus managed to evade capture, Garrow and his allies realized that the supposed human survivors of the virus bombardment had actually been transformed into demon hosts, becoming undead plague zombies of Nurgle. The virus bombing had weakened the barrier between the Immaterium and Istvan III, allowing the influence of the Plague Lord to take root. With Cerberus's assistance, Garrow and his loyalist Astartes defeated the foul abominations. However, once the undead had been vanquished, Garrow found himself once again facing Cerberus in a deadly confrontation. In this climactic battle, Garrow succeeded in reaching through the amnesia and fractured consciousness of Cerberus, awakening the remnants of the noble man that still resided within. He reminded Cerberus of his true identity and the Emperor's enduring purpose for him in eradicating the corruption afflicting the Imperium. Reclaiming his true self, Garviel Loken joined forces with Garrow and his team. With their cadre of warriors now complete, Garrow and Loken departed Istvan III for Luna, where they would receive their first mission from Malcador. Loken arrived at Somnus Citadel as a shattered, wretched soul, a madman unearthed from the ruins of Istvan III by Nathaniel Garrow. It would be much later that Loken would realize he had been closer to death during that interrogation than at any other moment in his life. Those who wished him gone did not come with blades or bombardments. Instead, they arrived armed with doubts, fears, and suspicions. Could he be trusted? Was it possible for anyone, even a space marine, to have survived such horrors? Had he been left among the ruins for Garrow to discover by their enemies? Was Garviel Loken a ticking time bomb planted by Horus, poised to infiltrate the Imperial ranks and unleash chaos in the future? No one could say for certain, though powerful figures had advocated for him. Garrow and Malcador without question, and Loken suspected the Primarch Rogel Dawn, the Castellan of Terror himself. Yet others, whose identities remained a mystery, deemed him a threat, a potential spy for the War Master, or something even worse. What followed was an indeterminate span of anguish and despair, inflicted upon his body, and the depths of his psyche in pursuit of answers to these troubling questions. His continued existence was not viewed as a conclusive affirmation of his loyalty. Rather, it suggested that his interrogators had found nothing sufficiently incriminating to oppose the desires of the Regent of Terror and the Emperor's golden-armoured Praetorian. Loken's faith and loyalty to the Emperor was rewarded. The Imperium believed in Loken just as he believed in it. Thus a knight was born. After becoming a member of Malcador's Knights-Errant, Garviel Loken was dispatched by Malcador on his inaugural mission to the Dark Angel's homeworld of Caliban, accompanied by his former comrade from the Lunar Wolves' Iacton crews. Their critical task required the Knights-Errant to evaluate both the First Legion's capabilities and their fidelity to their Primarch, Lionel Johnson. Upon infiltrating the Dark Angel's fortress monastery of Alduruk, Loken allowed himself to be captured. Bound in chains, he soon found himself under the scrutiny of Caliban's regent, Luther. Identifying himself solely as Cerberus, Luther nonetheless managed to deduce Loken's background as a former Lunar Wolf, relying only on his Chthonian accent. Luther recounted their shared experiences during battles at Cardensine and Zaramund, which triggered vivid flashbacks for Loken. As Luther continued his examination by torchlight, he vaguely recognized Loken but could not pinpoint his identity. He questioned Loken about the rationale behind one legion spying on another, revealing that the regent of Caliban remained lamentably uninformed about the greater events of the heresy engulfing the galaxy. Though Loken yearned to divulge the entire truth, he sensed that Caliban was shrouded in darkness and would ultimately succumb to it. Shortly after, Loken was approached by a small, hooded figure, a watcher in the dark. Through telepathy, the Xenos creature imparted to Loken a fraction of its abilities, enabling him to sense Luther's emotions. The watcher offered no explanation for its presence, but liberated Loken from his bonds, urging him to report to both Dawn and Malcador about his observations. Specifically, Luther's ignorance regarding the heresy and his underlying ambition and resentment towards Lion. This revelation complicated Loken's mission, as Terra remained oblivious to Lion's true loyalties. During his escape, Loken was confronted by a shadowy figure who approached him stealthily and pressed a power blade against his throat. Startled, Loken heard the figure call his name. Introducing himself as Lord Cypher, the figure proceeded to assist Loken in his flight. Upon encountering a lone Dark Angel sentry, Cypher commanded the guard to halt, allowing Loken the chance to subdue him. Unfortunately, Cruz took matters into his own hands, coldly executing the guard with his stalker pattern bolter. Loken, outraged by Cruz's ruthless disregard, admonished the older knight-errant for resorting to such brutality, explaining that the death of this Dark Angel could potentially sway the balance of loyalty against the Imperium. The seasoned warrior dismissed Loken's concerns, stating that the sentry was not the first loyal servant of the Imperium he had slain, nor would he be the last. With Cypher's assistance, the two knight-errants successfully escaped from the depths of the Dark Angel's fortress monastery. Although they had failed in their original mission, they had perhaps discovered something of greater significance: a potential ally in Cypher. The Dark Angel was aware of the broader events unfolding in the galaxy, but indicated that the situation on Caliban was intricate. Cruz extended an invitation for his old comrade to become one of Malcador's agents. However, Cypher ultimately declined the generous offer, choosing instead to continue his service in the shadows, loyal to the Emperor, yet unacknowledged and unknown. After the failure of their mission, Loken returned to the Somnus Citadel on Luna, the stronghold of the Silent Sisterhood. Already informed of the mission's outcome through astropathic communication, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists had nonetheless paused his efforts in dismantling his father's opulent palace to hear the grim news from Caliban directly. Loken had witnessed Rogel Dawn's hope that the flawed medium of astropathic communication might have overlooked some subtle nuance in Cruz's report, some indication that Lion's warriors could still be relied upon to rally to the Emperor's banner. However, Dawn would return to Terra none the wiser, and Loken felt his heart shatter at having disappointed him. Loken was weary of Malcador's half-truths and manipulations. He no longer wished to be a pawn in his labyrinthine schemes. Although he had survived the horrors on Istvan III, he was a man whose sanity concealed the true horrors lurking beneath the surface. Following his experiences on Caliban and the disastrous attempt to discern the Dark Angel's true loyalty, Loken retreated into a realm of isolation. The first signs of what others perceived as his madness began to surface when he encountered his former battle brother, Tarik Torgadon. Loken had taken to spending much of his time in an abandoned lunar biodome. The previous caretaker had allowed the space to become overgrown, neglecting its necessary weeding and maintenance. He later discovered that this biodome had once belonged to a silent sister, long deceased on Prospero, and that no one had taken up her duties as the upkeep of a space deemed purely aesthetic was viewed as wasteful. He devoted his efforts to cultivating a small garden. As a being bred for combat, not nurturing, this endeavour offered Loken a glimpse of the wonders of creation. It also granted him a modicum of peace, a foreign concept for a warrior forged in the Emperor's gene labs. The notion of peace felt meaningless. As far back as he could remember, he had never experienced anything akin to it. The madness that had nearly consumed him on Istvan III had left scars that were slow to heal, yet quick to reignite in sharp agony. Loken had stumbled upon the biodome by chance while vacantly staring through the armor-glass window of the orbital shuttle returning him to Luna. He had spent the journey home from the Caliban disaster in contemplative silence, isolating himself from the crew of the nameless vessel that had ventured into Dark Angel's territory before retreating like a thwarted thief. The weight of the mission's abject failure pressed heavily upon Loken, and he wrestled with his part in it during the long, cold nights spent in the vessel's dark recesses. He was a warrior who had turned his back on warfare, a man devoid of colours or a legion to call his own. In his depths of despair, he had come to see himself as a legion of one. However, Nathaniel Garrow had shown him that this was no longer the case. Though he no longer fought alone, he felt little connection to the warriors standing alongside him. The camaraderie of his former life was now merely a ghostly echo. One day, while tending to his garden, he was approached by a mysterious figure. The individual bore the bulk of a legionary, though Loken struggled to identify him, feeling that his appearance was maddeningly familiar. A cold grip tightened around Loken's heart as the man's previously indistinct features crystallized into those of a brother from a past life. It was his long-dead battle brother, Tarik Torgadon. Initially, Loken believed this so-called Torgadon to be a mere figment of his imagination, a memory conjured by his fractured mind. As Loken conversed with Torgadon, he became increasingly convinced that it was truly his old friend. Torgadon aided in unlocking the forgotten memories tangled within Loken's fractured synapses. Gazing at the garden, Loken recognized it for what it was, a replica of the water garden where he had taken the Mournival Oath. Torgadon reminded him of the solemn vows he had made when swearing this sacred oath, to serve the Emperor above all Primarchs, to uphold the truth of the Imperium of man against any evil that threatened it, and to stand resolutely against all foes, both alien and domestic. Loken had pledged his loyalty to the ideals of the Mournival, and he was nearly overwhelmed by a tide of suppressed memories. He recalled everything: the war on murder, the bloodshed born of misunderstanding on the Interex's homeworld, the horrors witnessed on Davin, the massacre of the Auretian technocracy, and the ultimate grotesque betrayal at Istvan III. He had always known these events but had found a way to keep them locked deep within his mind. No matter how hard he tried to forget, the memories remained stubbornly intact. Torgadden reminded him that he was a lunar wolf, and nothing was more dangerous than a wolf trapped in a corner. A man might control his actions, but he could never control the consequences of those actions. He urged Loken to seize command of his own choices. Before departing, Loken asked Torgadden if he was real, a question to which the other legionary could not easily respond. Torgadden had no clear explanation. He felt real, yet he suspected that something terrible had befallen him after his death. Loken pressed for an answer to what could possibly be worse than dying. Torgadden was uncertain, but believed Loken was the only one capable of rectifying it. After delivering this ominous warning, Torgadden took his leave. Not long after, Loken was visited by another familiar face, his fellow knight-errant, Iacton Cruz. He brought a summons from Malcador himself. Revitalized by Torgadden's visit, Loken felt prepared to undertake whatever task awaited him. Ultimately, Torgadden's appearance had jolted Loken back to reality, rekindling a sense of self that, while wounded, was not shattered. Although he travelled to Terra to meet Malcador, a lingering worry gnawed at Loken. The damage done to his mind made him feel untrustworthy. Nevertheless, he remained determined to serve to the best of his abilities, ready to receive his next mission from Malcador. Upon his arrival on Terra, Malcador collaborated with Leman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, and Loken to devise an audacious plan: to deploy a squad of knights-errant to infiltrate Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, which was then orbiting the world of Molech. The knights-errants were tasked with paving the way for a massive assault on the vessel led by the Wolf King himself, with the objective of eliminating the arch-traitor. Malcador entrusted Loken with this critical mission, and granted him the freedom to select his own squad members. The former Lunar Wolf enlisted 9 of his fellow knights-errant, Tylos Rubio, Mesa Varan, Iacton Cruz, Ramakarayan Aris Wojtek, Altan Nohai, Kalian Zavan, and Tubal Kain. At Leman Russ's urging, he also included one of his own sons, Bror Terfinger, in the ranks of the knights-errant. Loken sought to recruit his fellow Lunar Wolf, Severian, but Severian declined, believing the mission to be a fool's errand. However, as the knights-errant readied to depart from Terra, Severian ultimately changed his mind and decided to join them. Utilizing the advanced stealth vessel Tarnhelm and guided by Tubal Cain's superior sensors and strategic acumen, the squad successfully infiltrated the War Master's flagship without being detected. As they ventured deeper into the vast expanse of the Gloriana-class battleship, Bror Terfinger marked various locations with Futhark runes to assist in a future Space Wolves assault. However, their presence soon drew attention, and they encountered resistance throughout the colossal warship. Some knights-errant fell during these skirmishes, and the remainder of the squad was captured and brought before Lupercal's court, facing the War Master himself. Horus attempted to seduce Loken into rejoining his cause, and although tempted by his father's offer, the steadfast knight-errant refused, recalling his sacred oath to serve the Emperor above all else. The confrontation between father and son allowed Loken's fellow knights to turn against their captors. Several more members of Loken's squad were slain during the ensuing chaos, but the knights-errant managed to escape as the Tarnhelm blasted out the windows of the audience chamber, pulling them into the void where the stealth vessel rescued them from the vacuum of space. Varan, Wojtek, and a rescued ultramarine survivor from the surface of Molech, Centurion Proximo Tarchon, were placed in Susan-induced healing comas while Rubio recuperated from the ordeal. During the journey back to Terra aboard the Tarnhelm, both Bror Terfinger and Severian reassured their squad leader that the mission's failure was not his fault. Afterward, Loken returned to Terra, where in the final days of the Horus heresy, just prior to the siege of Terra, he joined Nathaniel Garrow, Masa Varan, Vardas Ison, and Helig Galor among the Knights Errant, tasked with quelling outbreaks of chaos infestation spreading across the throne world in anticipation of Horus's invasion. Loken was appointed to oversee a project initiated by Malcador at the White Mountain, an ancient subterranean fortress situated in a desolate and irradiated area of Terra. Malcador had ordered a group of Sisters of Silence, who had been captured and tortured by the forces of chaos before being rescued by the Loyalists, to be detained there while his researchers sought to uncover the extent of what had been done to them. In truth, the Altered Sisters were part of a sinister plot by the traitors to assassinate Malcador through a subliminal mental command psychically embedded in Tylos Rubio's mind by the first chaplain of the Word-Bearers, Erebus. Rubio, a knight-errant who had fought at the Battle of Calth, had been subjected to these hidden manipulations. The scheme unfolded as the White Mountain came under siege by Chaos cultists and the Nurgle demon known as the Lord of Flies. As the knights-errant deployed to the slopes of the fortress to repel the assault, Rubio's mental conditioning was activated by the Sisters of Silence held captive within the White Mountain's confines. Under the influence of the implanted command, Rubio launched an attack against Malcador, who was rendered vulnerable due to the fortress's anti-psyker technology. However, Malcador managed to fend off the attack using a concealed conversion field before psychically stripping Rubio's mind of the conditioning. On the slopes of the White Mountain, Loken, Garrow, and the other knights-errant successfully repelled the Chaos incursion, although Mesa Varan sustained mortal wounds and became possessed by the Lord of Flies, turning on his World-Eater comrades. Yet when confronted by Loken, the possessed Astartes faltered. Loken sought to remind him of their friendship and his true self, a man who was never subjugated or controlled by the foul influence of a chaos demon. Loken's intervention sparked a flicker of Varan's old defiance, allowing the World-Eater to summon the willpower to push back against the demon's control. In a final act of desperation, he detonated a brace of grenades he had torn from Loken's armor, sacrificing himself to vanquish the threat. The demon's hold on reality was ultimately shattered by Malcador, who, having arrived on the mountain's exterior, utilized his restored psychic abilities to incinerate the demon and its remaining plague flies to ash. Soon after the conclusion of the battle at White Mountain, Loken and 8 other knights-errant were escorted to a chamber situated deep beneath the Imperial Palace complex. There they were granted an audience with the Emperor himself, who revealed that these 9 Astartes were to become the founders of a new chapter of Space Marines dedicated to combating the horrors of the warp and safeguarding humanity from the taint of chaos. However, to join this new chapter, each selected Astartes had to be prepared to abandon their pasts and everything they once were, embarking on a fresh beginning. Each would assume a new name and identity, becoming the leaders of this emerging organization. Loken was slated to become Krios, one of the inaugural Grand Masters of what would later be known as the Grey Knights. Yet upon witnessing the Emperor in person for the first time, he came to the realization that this fate was not meant for him. He rejected the new identity offered by Malcador and chose to return to the surface. Loken was unwilling to relinquish his past. He felt a deep need to confront the Sons of Horus once more and seek retribution for the War Master's treachery in the impending and dreadful siege of Terra. Loken is a shining example of the mind's triumph over corruption through sheer force of rational will. Loken was a notably introspective, composed and rational space marine, often referred to as the Quiet One. within the Lunar Wolves Mournival by Horus. Though he did not speak frequently, he consistently astonished those around him with the profound depth of his intellect and character, qualities unexpected in one bred for warfare. Like most of his legion, Loken hailed from Chthoniya, the ancient mining world near Terra, where the Emperor of Mankind had rediscovered Horus Lupercal during the early days of the Great Crusade. Unlike many of his fellow Astartes, Loken dedicated a significant portion of his time to reading and studying ancient texts, such as the Chronicles of Ursh. These were lent to him by his friend, the iterator Kirill Sinderman, from the extensive librarium of ancient human writings aboard the Lunar Wolves battle barge, Vengeful Spirit. In the days preceding the heresy, Loken cultivated many friendships within the 16th Legion, as well as outside of it, a rare trait for an Astartes, as the Lunar Wolves typically disregarded the common men and women, whom many of their kind referred to dismissively as mortals. Among those he befriended were the remembrancers Mercedes Oliton and Ignace Carcassy. Oliton, a writer, often accompanied Loken, meeting him in his personal armory to document his experiences in battle. Carcassy, a poet who had found himself in trouble with the imperial army for openly expressing his concerns about the potential immorality of the Great Crusade's conquests, caught Loken's attention after narrowly escaping a brutal beating. Loken admired Carcassy's remarkable willingness to speak the truth, even when he disagreed with the poet's conclusions, and he sponsored Carcassy's continued presence within the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, protecting him even when Carcassy's poetry began to openly critique the Astartes. Another significant figure in Loken's life was Kirill Sinderman, an iterator who served as part of the corps of imperial propagandists accompanying each Great Crusade Expeditionary Fleet to facilitate the cultural integration of conquered human worlds into the Imperium by disseminating the imperial truth. Loken frequently engaged in deep discussions on a wide range of intellectual topics, including religion with Sinderman. Religion had been dismissed as mere superstition by the rationalism of the official creed of the imperial truth. This association, coupled with Loken's protection of the remembrancer Ignace Carcassy, later led to conflict between him and Horus, as well as with the War Master's new confidant, First Chaplain Erebus of the Word-Bearers Legion. Manipulated by the long-corrupt Erebus, the War Master turned against all the remembrancers accompanying the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet shortly before the Istvan III atrocity. Horus deemed them unnecessary for his impending war against the Emperor, especially as they began to reveal the truth about the Legion's corruption by chaos. Consequently, once the Loyalists arrived on Istvan III and could no longer protect them, Horus ordered his Astartes to execute all the remembrancers in the Sons of Horus fleet. Sinderman, however, managed to survive and escape to the Eisenstein with the assistance of Iacton Cruz, ultimately becoming one of the founding members of the Inquisition.